Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, welcome, and I hope you enjoy the videos here. I also hope you get to subscribe to this channel. If you're a returning subscriber, thank you so much for coming back. I really appreciate it. So today, as promised, we're going to talk about revising for the GPHC registration exam, and that's the exam that you take once you've finished your OSPAP, once you've finished your pre-reg, or when you're almost finishing your pre-reg, and that's kind of the last step for you to become a UK pharmacist, provided you pass that exam. So I feel like this would be two videos because I want to talk about revising, and then I also want to talk about the actual exam and tactics and tips to help and things like that. And if I do it in one video, it's going to be super long, like 100 minutes. So what I'm going to talk about today is revising. I have some books over there that I think, or I thought, might be useful to show you. Again, I will link everything in the description box. All the links to the books I'm going to talk about as well will all be in the description box, so you can always check for it there. So as I said in my previous video, when I started my pre-reg, I was able to identify very early on my areas of weakness, and I think that's very important because it allows you know what you want to focus on just so you pass the exam. But let me tell you the first thing to do. The first thing I would say is starting early. So don't leave it last minute. For example, most people are going to start their pre-reg placement around August or September. So maybe some people October, but August and September is usually the popular time for people to start their pre-reg, and the exam is in June of the following year. So you might think, oh, it's still far. No, start practicing, start preparing from the get-go, because when that time, like before the exam, when the exam draws near, you find out that you're not panicked, you're not doing things rushing, you're not feeling like you haven't covered everything that you want to cover, because again, I don't think it's possible to cover everything, but you want to be able to cover as much as you physically can, and obviously leave everything to God to help you. It's all in God's hands, to be honest. That's just my belief and that's my faith. The next step I would say will be really helpful is going on the GPHC website. When you go on the website, there's something called the assessment framework, and what that framework does, it tells you almost like how they're going to frame the questions, or what percentage of topics will be found in the questions. So that kind of is a little bit helpful, and it helps you focus on where you want to revise a little bit more on, because it tells you this percentage, is a high weighting. I think they do high weighting, medium weighting, and low weighting. If you go on there, it would say, maybe something like cardiology or cardiac medications would be high weighting. So it means you need to really study it properly. Something like maybe pediatrics might be medium weighting, respiratory might be medium, some other things might be low weighting. So you really want to go on there. I don't know if it changes year by year. I feel like it does, but just go on there. Make sure you have everything. Make sure you have the framework printed out if you can, or just make little notes on maybe like your revision kind of plan. If you have one, I had one. It kind of helped me, but you don't have to have one, just anything that works for you. So once you have that, and you put that at the side, and remember when I said you identify your area of weakness, so I did mine very early on, because where I did my pre-reg, I said, they were very good to us. We had like half day of teaching sessions every Wednesday, and sometimes we had like calculation tests. Actually, we had calculation tests very early. I think like maybe the first or second one, and it was done because they wanted to know, what level everybody was on. And without any shame, I was not on a good level whatsoever. And just me as a normal person, I love calculations. I can calculate things pretty easy. But these questions were very different to me. Like, there weren't questions I was used to. And I was like, oh my God, how could I not know these things? Because when they were giving us these calculation tests, they were not just giving us to pass, they were giving it to us in exam conditions. So usually it would be 20 questions or 40 questions, and in the exam it's actually 40 questions, and I think it's about 2 hours. I say an hour and a half. I think it's about one and a half hours or 2 hours. I'll put the right amount of hours on the screen. So which means that you have to be kind of pretty much on top of everything, like you need to pass the, you need to know your calculations properly. So once I identified that calculations were not my best friend, especially those types of calculations, not all of them, some of them are pretty easy, like, standard concentration, those ones were pretty easy. And, how many tablets does the patient need for, so those ones were easy. I'm talking about infusion rates. We're talking about like all these really weird and wonderful things. At that time, to me, I was thinking, oh my God. So I had a discussion with my tutor, and together we drew up a plan. And a part of that plan was ensuring that I started very early with the calculations. Okay, so it meant that every day I was doing calculations. So I started from the very beginning, like basic calculations. I had one book, let me show you. So I just grabbed the two books. So the first book I had, which was useful, is this one from Lloyd's Pharmacy. Yes, at the time. So this is what I started with. And I think I got this during my OSPAP. I really don't know where I got it from, but I'll put a link if I can find it in the description box. Well, I don't know if Lloyd's Pharmacies have them. I mean, you could always ask them. But that's how I got this book. And this book was really good because it enabled me like ease my way into the whole calculations and learn it properly. So every day I was doing a certain amount of calculation. And the tip my tutor told me was, don't concentrate on your speed just yet. Concentrate on getting the answers correctly. And that makes sense. Make sure you get it correctly. And once you know the technique and you're very good at it, then you can then start increasing your speed and doing it quicker. Because obviously it's not about knowing it. You need to know it, and you need to be able to know the answer at the right time. And with the calculations, they had different instructions, and which I'll talk about in another video on the actual structure of the GPHC exam. So some of them would say to 1 decimal point. If you don't put it to 1 decimal point, you have failed that question. And I know that's crazy. There's no forgiveness. Let me just put it that way. You need to get the right question, right answer. And that's if it's to 1 decimal point, it has to be, and it has to be exact, no estimation, nothing. If they say to the nearest whole number, to the nearest this, you need to obey those instructions, okay? But the book that really, really helped me was this one, and I'll link it down below, and it is the Introduction to Pharmaceutical Calculations. You guys, this book was really amazing, and I feel like with this, and obviously with the calculation tests we were doing and all the other practices that I did, it really, really helped me in the exam. Again, I will link this book in the description box, and then you can find out. I think if you're a member of the Royal Pharmaceutical Society, I think you can get discounts, but I'm not 100% sure. I'll research that. Okay, so that's the first thing to do, or second thing to do when you identify area of weakness. Another thing is obviously familiarizing yourself with the BNF. Yes, because majority or some of the questions will come from the BNF, and the structure of the GPHC exam now is pushing towards more clinical aspects of being a pharmacist, but it would also include other things like working in communities, so the legal parts. There are just so many other things that would include, but clinical aspects is kind of heavy on it's because that's what they're pushing for, pharmacists to be more clinically inclined and things like that. So that is reflected in the exam. So I'll show you the BNF. I'm pretty sure most people know how the BNF looks. This is not the current one, but this is the one I have. I mean, most people don't really have BNFs. Like, we have it on the phones, so you can download the app, and it's pretty good. They update it pretty often, and I feel like I like the electronic one because with the printed copy, they make amendments and everything. It can change. But this one was from March 2020. There's another edition, which would have started from, I think, September of 2020. So it should be out by now, but I don't have it. It's probably in the hospital. So yeah, so with the BNF, right, most people say you have to read the whole of the BNF. I didn't do that. I'm not saying you should do the same thing. No, if you can, and if you start early, you can literally go through the whole BNF, especially when you use it with the assessment framework that I mentioned earlier to guide you on what areas to concentrate on. What I think was very useful for me was looking on the treatment summaries, and you usually find that at the beginning of the chapters of specific sections in the BNF, or you could find it if you're doing it online as well. You could read all the treatment summaries, because it's almost like a summary of that chapter, and then it kind of gives you an understanding of easing to those medicines and things like that. So when you familiarize yourself with the BNF, it kind of helps, and you can walk through it quite easily. And I mean, it's a big book, so you have to start early and start doing it. But one thing I have to say is that because I was working in hospital, it was a little bit easier to remember some of the conditions and some of the interactions of the medicines or some of the side effects, because I was working with pharmacists and we would see loads and loads and loads of patients, as you would imagine. So for example, if a patient was confused, or they were in bed and they were dehydrated or something like that, we'd usually check the electrolytes, and then you say, oh yeah, so hyponatremia. When you see that kind of question in exam, you think, oh yeah, I remember this patient, it quickly comes to mind. But obviously if you're doing it in community, I'm sure there are other ways to be able to read and remember these conditions. The same with maybe a patient came in and they had like an acute kidney injury, something called AKI, and maybe you're with a pharmacist and they say, oh yeah, we're going to stop this med and this, and they give advice to the doctors, or, make interventions. And then you remember, oh yeah, so these drugs are nephrotoxic. Therefore, if someone's kidney is not working properly, they will suspend it or they will stop it, depending. So those kind of things, the clinical areas, I feel like it's a little bit more easier for people who work in hospital. But I'm not saying people who work in community don't know it. They do know it as well. But I feel like because you've seen it, it's easier to remember. So I think doing my pre-reg in hospital definitely helped with the clinical aspects. Now, another book is the MEP. This is the Medicines, Ethics and Practice. This is an old one. Now, this is actually online. And I feel like as a pre-reg student or pre-reg pharmacist, it's actually like a very reduced price, or it's free. I cannot remember. But again, it's online. It is free. You can have it on your phone. And it's another book that is really good. It contains mainly the legal aspects of pharmacy, so the laws and ethical guidelines and things like that. So with the MEP, it's a really, really important book to read. It's not one that you want to ignore, because they ask quite a good number of questions from here, and it has all the legal aspects. So you have things like, let me see, prescription requirements, what you want to see in a controlled drug prescription. There's so many things, like the things you would normally see in community pharmacy. Yeah, you would need this book as well. And I had some other textbooks that were a little bit important. I mentioned earlier that during my OSPAP, my school gave us books, and they were really, really useful. I'll put a picture of all of them because they're quite heavy. And some of these books, I think the MEP they did give us when I was doing my OSPAP. But I want to highlight these two books that are really, really helpful. One is the Paul Rotter's Community Pharmacy book. And this book is so amazing because there are so many questions that will come out on community pharmacy in the GPHC exam. So things like, skin conditions, an eye infection, an ear infection, all those kind of things. Yes, you will see them. And in hospital, you might not see a lot of these things, but in community, you will. And that's why this book is really useful. And then it tells you what kind of treatment options, the red warning signs, what to do, how to refer someone onwards, and all that. And lastly, the other book I really want to talk about, this one's a really heavy one. It's the Clinical Pharmacy and Therapeutics. Now, this book, you don't have to get it. It is really, really useful. But even as a pharmacist, if you work in hospital, I think it's such a good book. And it's one of the things where I'm so grateful that Brighton, University of Brighton, which is the university where I went to, they were good enough to give us really good books. Okay. So another source that I used was RPS, which is the Royal Pharmaceutical Society. Yeah, so if you are a pre-reg pharmacist, I think you can register. I have a feeling it's free for pre-reg pharmacists. I think it is. It's actually free. I'm still a member, and I pay about £18 per month to be a member. But as a pre-reg pharmacist, I think it's free. And even with your first year after becoming a pharmacist, I think it's also a reduced amount. I can't remember now. But yeah, I've always been a member of the RPS, and it's good enough because you get discounts there. So you get discounts to some of the books. If you're going to buy the MEP, you get discounts, and some of it, they have things. They have one, I think it's the Pharmaceutical Press or something like that. You can get discounts from there. So it is very good. Mock exams. So I think halfway towards our pre-reg year, we started having mock exams, and it was organized by our hospital, which was amazing. So our tutors or some of the other senior pharmacists, especially pharmacists, put together questions that were mimicking the GPHC exam, and we all did it. And you would know what your score was. So it was a combination of both the calculations and the other part of the exam, which is part A and part B. So they did that, and that way you could then identify areas that you need to work on more. Some other organizations did mock exams which you had to pay to attend. So I think Greenlight did one. I know RPS, which is the Royal Pharmaceutical Society, they also did one, which I paid for. And they do it like, I think the year, like from, if I'm not wrong, maybe January, February, March. Like they do it the beginning of the next year once you start your pre-reg. So yeah, some people pay for it and go and they enjoy it. Some people don't. It doesn't really matter. But I went for it. And the reason I went for it, I actually went in March. I wanted to gauge how much more I need to prepare, if I felt ready for the exam and all that. I don't know why. I personally feel like the mock exam was more difficult than the actual exam, but it was good because they taught us so much. They also gave us some booklets, and it wasn't cheap. I think it was about £150 to £200. I can't remember now. But it wasn't cheap, and that's why I feel some people didn't go for it. But if you don't have access to it, or you don't want to go for any of those, there are so many mock exams and there are so many past questions that people would have. So you could learn from your friends and all that kind of stuff. I also mentioned in my previous video that we had something called study days, nationally regional ones. So we also had mock exams during those regional ones, and it was good because they'll give you feedback on what, and then it could tell you if you passed or you failed. But obviously, it's the beginning of you haven't taken a real exam yet, so it gives you kind of an idea of how to prepare. So these mock exams, I found them really, really useful. I mentioned that we were a team of pre-reggers, and I really, really enjoyed being in that team because they shared information. So any information we had, maybe if I had something that was new and I enjoyed it, I'll share it on the team and then or on our team WhatsApp group. And everybody was just sharing so much stuff, and it was so good. Okay, so share information, get information. People had access to drop boxes. There were notes to read, and just useful things like that. Those things really, really helped me. Okay, and then the main thing is obviously familiarizing yourself with things like the SPC, which you would get in the exam. So let me just quickly give a little brief summary of how the exam is structured, but I will talk about it in another video. So there's part A, which is calculation questions, and they're about 40 questions, and I think it's under 2 hours, if I'm not wrong. Yeah, I can't remember now. It's around 2 hours. Okay, so you do that, and then I think you have a little bit of maybe an hour or so to rest, or maybe 2 hours, I can't remember. And then you come back for part B. Part B has 2 sections. So part B altogether has 120 questions. 90 of those are best answers. So it's multiple choice, but best answers. And then the remaining 30 is extended matching. So it's different. It means that you can use the same answers a couple of times, and it's like almost like little case studies. They'll say, oh, a patient comes in, they have this, they have that, they are experiencing this and this. These are some of their medications. Which of this which of these side effects is caused by a specific drug? Those kind of questions. Yeah. So that's it, and you have to pass. So I found that over the years, the pass mark, you have to pass both sections. So you have to pass part A and part B. If you fail part B by even 1 mark, you have failed the whole pre-reg. And if you fail whichever part you fail, you have to pass both of them, and they both have different pass marks. So for example, I feel like over the years, I think it's been between 65% to 70%, which is quite a lot. So I think for calculation, it's usually 28. So you need to get at least 28 over 40. And for the part B, I think it's about maybe 85, 88 or 80 something out of 120. So it is not a low pass mark. It's pretty high. So it's minimum. You're looking at getting at least B, a very high B, or at the worst part, an A, which is why people do fail it. Because even if you fail one question and it was just very close to the pass mark, you will still fail the whole exam. So it's pretty serious. Okay, what else did I used to revise? I revised on my own a lot. I revised with other people, and it was very useful as well because you could ask each other questions. I made loads and loads of notes. I was literally reading every opportunity that I had. I was discussing with my tutor, you know, and I practiced a lot of past questions. Now, I think the year we did mine, so mine was in 2017, I think. In 2016, they changed the structure of the exam. So usually, I think it was more of an open book system, but now it's a closed book system, which means you can't go in with anything. They'll give you all your references to look at. There'll be a big booklet of references that would relate to each part of the questions, and it's looking into those references that can actually waste your time, which is why it's good to familiarize yourself with the BNF. It's good to familiarize yourself with the SPC, which I will link down below. It's mainly like a collection of all medicines, and you know, like the manufacturers put information of medicines on there. I think it's called the Electronic Medicine Consortium or something like that. It is called the EMC, but people call it SPC. So it has all the information of drugs. So if you know the structure, because they might say, oh, what is the storage condition for drug X? And if you're not familiar with the structure of the SPC, you're going to be flipping and flipping and flipping, and that's wasting your time. Mind you, you're going to be like under a lot of stress during exam. Okay, so that's pretty much what I did. I really hope this was useful. If I remember anything else, I will put it in the description box below. And if you have any questions, again, ask me. I'm thinking of doing 2 more videos. One other video would be talking about the actual exam, and, you know, because this is just revising on what I did, and then, you know, closer to the time of the exam, what I did to practice a little bit more and obviously passing the exam. So I'll do a separate video on that. I'm also thinking about talking about the OSPAP course in itself, because I had been getting some questions on what the modules look like and things like that, and obviously they will differ from university to university. And actually talk about my Brighton experience, but I have to go and find my old books and things like that, so I'll look for them, and if I'm able to do that, or if you want me to do that kind of video, let me know in the description box so you would know what to expect from the OSPAP modules. Okay, that's me done. I hope this video was useful. Thank you so much for watching these videos. Thank you so much for the feedback I get. It really means a lot to me, and I'm glad that I'm able to help people. Thank you, and have a lovely week ahead. Bye bye.